Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash.
Well, is that what President Biden said about the Republican donors?
Yeah, boy, did he throw a doozy, John, calling them garbage Trump supporters. And today, I guess typical for garbage, he's trying to clean up. Because it is a mess. And did you see this, Judge Weinberg? He was trying to put the White House is like, well, he didn't mean all Trump supporters. He just meant one with an apostrophe S. Give me a break.
I'm going to go downstairs and jump in the trash.
So Rita.
I think a lot of people, tens of millions will, John. They'll
Rita,
join you.
Rita, so I'm no longer a deplorable?
Yeah, you're worse now. You're garbage.
Oh. Okay.
And you know what? And you know what? That was Trump's reaction, guys. When this news broke, and it happened, I was on the air, on my show at night here at 10 o'clock, and all of a sudden the news broke. We played it, and it was so extreme. People were going, I can't believe that he actually said that. We played it over and over again. There is no gray. He said Trump supporters are trash.
Garbage,
and when you look at it, garbage. It's,
and
to
we
me.
have some other breaking news. Where's the breaking news?
Breaking news, WABC.
Now, I understand that the former chief of staff, Kelly, the Democrats are saying, well, Trump was X, Y, Z. But is Kelly all that good? What happened with General Kelly? What is being reported now?
Yeah,
Rita?
This is a biggie, John. It is being reported that the former White House chief of staff, John Kelly, remember, who has been very critical of President Trump of late, it said that apparently he not only has some ties to this group, especially called Caliburton International. And what's important about it, it is a for-profit company that operates massive shelters for migrants.
So does that mean the more migrants that come through, that the General Kelly is no longer loyal to the United States? Bring in the migrants so we can do business and fill up the
well, you can
shelters?
make the case he would make more money, more migrants, more money. You could make the case of that. Wow.
How many stars did General have?
He had a 4-star. He's a 4-star.
A 4-star general is not loyal to the United States of America and would rather make money on filling up the
with the migrant shelters. Well, you know what, John? It begs the question, of course, when there's money involved, that's certainly a conflict. And maybe it explains why he has been critical of Trump, who has been saying he wants to secure our borders.
If Trump is president, there'll be no migrants. His company will go bankrupt.
That's the issue, John. And by the way, speaking of migrants, John, wait till you hear this one. Last night, Kamala Harris did her, quote, closing arguments. And in her closing argument, she actually talked out of both sides of her mouth, John. On one hand, she said, I will remove immediately the illegals. And then she said, but we also want to push for a pathway to citizenship. She doesn't know what she's saying.
How do you do that?
Totally amazing.
She does. And by the way, that great voice, everybody, that you're hearing is Dr.
And we have,
Sky.
yes, and we have a special guest.
Very good to be here. Honored, John, Rita, Rudy, Judge. It was a pleasure and a privilege of honor to be here on WABC. So thank you for having me. It's a long time since I've been back to the New York area.
And you're a New York guy, right?
Absolutely.
A Jamaica Queens.
Born in Jamaica,
we love
Queens.
this.
And in a
Proud
little
New
while, Frank Morano is going to call in today.
Yes.
Today is a special day. It's what, the 80th anniversary?
86th anniversary.
86th anniversary.
Of Orson Welles' epic broadcast, The War of the Worlds, on the Mercury Theater. This is amazing. We have a lot to say about that.
And where were the Martians landing? In New Jersey someplace?
In New Jersey, Grover's Mill, New Jersey, a very tiny little outpost in New Jersey.
Is there really a Groversville?
There is. It's amazing. It's like a little shack that has a name on it. And
so
if anybody's
you people
listening
out
there and they're
there
upset
in
with what I said.
Groversville, New Jersey, watch out. 86 years later, maybe the Martians are coming down.
Yeah, it does feel, some of the things feel out of this world.
Right,
some of the
absolutely.
things we're experiencing.
Yeah.
So
It's amazing to be here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. We are living with all the rules of laws being ignored. We are living in bizarro world.
Yeah, bizarro world. And by the way,
That's a good way to put it, John.
But some good news today on the legal front, really quick. Virginia gets a big win from the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court sides with Virginia and says, guess what? As if it's an epiphany, right. Non-citizens should not be on the voter rolls. Judge Weinberg.
Excellent decision. You have to thank Governor Youngkin and Attorney General Meyeris for leading that fight. They lost on U.S. District Court level, the Court of Appeals level, but the Supreme Court did the right thing. 6-3, made very, very clear that Youngkin and Meyeris were doing the right thing. God bless them.
But they also said that RFK Jr. can't be taken off in 2 swing states.
In Michigan and Wisconsin, RFK wanted to get off the ballot. He's supporting President Trump, and it will dilute President Trump's votes. Right. And if I were giving advice to the Republican committee, I would say very simply, RFK Jr., get to Michigan, get to Wisconsin, tell the people, don't waste your vote. I support Trump. Vote for Trump.
And other big news, Judge Weinberg, on Act Blue. Fill us in because some subpoenas went out and explain what it means.
The House Administration Committee offered subpoenas against Act Blue and affiliated companies. And
now, wait, we have to explain. Not everybody knows what Act Blue is.
Act Blue is the fundraising mechanism for the Democratic Party. There are allegations that what they've done, there are nominees who were taking money from foreign countries, phony identifications, and moving money
into the Democratic Party.
Campaigns.
And the way they were doing it was the way the allegations are, and Congress is investigating, is they did an AI report on all the people who haven't voted for the last 5 years, and they were siphoning contributions through those accounts.
And there was one person, it all started when there was a complaint by somebody who was a Republican. 385 times they used his name to show he's making a contribution. And, of course, the contributions are less than $200, $199 or less, and therefore they're not reported on campaign finance files.
So that's an active investigation in Congress, and God forbid we lose Congress. You know what happens to all those investigations?
Gets buried.
Exactly.
It goes in the sewer. Now, we're going to have one of the attorney generals on.
Yeah, Jason Meyeris from Virginia, who's been right there leading the fight. He's going to be joining us later in the show on that, John, for sure. And also Michael Goodwin. We have Andy McCarthy, Susan Crabtree from Real Clear Politics. And you guys, right now, we have Sean Spicer, former White House press secretary, joining us here on Katz and Cosby. Sean, first, let's get your reaction to President Biden, the sitting president of the United States, saying clear as day that, Trump supporters are garbage.
Good to be with you guys. Look, I don't think it's a stretch. He's made it very clear. He ran in 2016 because he didn't like Donald Trump. He was opposed to Donald Trump. And then he said he was running for re-election because of Donald Trump. So the idea that he didn't mean it just doesn't pass the smell test, right? So that's number one. Number two, and I think both of you guys will get this better than anyone because of your histories in the media. But what I thought was hysterical is Tim Walz was pre-booked on ABC's Good Morning America this morning. He gets on, and the first thing that George Stephanopoulos says to him is Republicans are seizing on comments as if we did something bad or wrong. It's like for 72 hours, every Republican had to account for a comedian who told a bad joke 4 hours before President Trump spoke. And here we have – and then, by the way, Stephanopoulos followed it up by saying, do you think that he, Biden, stepped on her message? Not do you denounce it, not should he apologize on it, not do you have to apologize for it, but do you think he stepped on your message? So it was okay to call 75 million people garbage. I mean, it just shows you the double standard, the hypocrisy, and the complicity of today's media. So and I know that people would say, you guys know this, but I think continuing to point it out is something that we need to do so that people fully appreciate the length and breadth and depth of how in the tank this media is for Harris. I don't think it will matter. But I don't think it's surprising, getting back to your first question, Rita, that what President Biden said. This is what he feels. This is what Harris feels. This is what most, Harris folks feel. They look and despise people who could possibly vote
Well, you know what? And Sean, I look back. I mean, I think about the basket of deplorables comment by Hillary Clinton. That was September 2016. How about Peter Strzok? Remember that guy who said, I'm walking into a Walmart and I can smell the Trump supporters. Rudy Washington's nodding his head because that was so despicable. Obama, clinging to their guns and their religion. And you know, the other thing I found today, Sean, I saw some of the interview with Walz. He also was asked about it. He did not denounce it. That was disgraceful. He had an opportunity to denounce it, and instead he said, well, we believe a different thing. I mean, as opposed to there's something despicable about saying it.
That's my point, though, Rita. Exactly what you're saying, which is these guys get off. They don't. Everybody says, will Trump denounce this? Or you apologize for it. Puerto Ricans are going nuts about this. And yet here we are. The president, not a comedian, the president of the United States says 75+ million Americans are garbage. And they're not even asked about it. I mean, it's disgusting how horrible the media is. And I'm glad President Trump handles it the way he does, which is he's going on Rogan, the Nelk Boys, Patrick Bet-David. He is creating a home for conservative media to flourish, and I think that's a great thing.
Judge Weinberg.
Sean, good to talk to you again. Let me ask you a question. Isn't this consistent with the final messaging of the Harris campaign, after all? That everybody who supports them are fascists or semi-fascists or totalitarians, and they want to lock everybody up? And didn't she say last night in her remarks, didn't she say that he has an enemies list that he's going to go after? I mean, and this is the woman who also claimed the same speech. She's going to unite the country. Will you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, if I could explain it to you, Judge, I'd be in a bad place. But I will say you're right, that this is what they want to close with. People ask me all the time, do you think that's a winning message? And I'll say to them, do you realize they don't have any other message? This is all they have left. This is an abortion because they can't talk about the economy. They can't talk about border. They can't talk about, helping small businesses or helping businesses grow and prosper because their policies are horrible. And Trump can get up there and I think you talk about a closing message, both what he said at Madison Square Garden, where you guys are, and these final ads that he has out. He can just say, look, you know my record. You know what I did as president. If you like it, vote for me. If you don't, vote for them. It's so simple. It's so easy. And I think that's what's going to enamor more and more voters to vote for him because
Sean, this is Rudy Washington. This morning, former President Trump said he believes that Biden likes him better than he likes Kamala Harris.
It was a sabotage.
Well,
do you blame him?
Listen, but we're kind of laughing, but it's kind of true.
Yes, it is. It's kind of true. I think because the other people really did him in before he, he didn't even realize what was happening, and he got what do you call it?
Shivved.
He got shivved.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Brutus.
There you go. Well, the thing is, though, they don't want her to win.
This is a coup on the United States, a coup on the United States of America, and none of the newspapers is saying anything. That they pushed this man out because they didn't like him, and they substituted him.
Yeah, but they also feel the Biden team feels very disrespected by Kamala. They don't like the fact that she hasn't played him any deference. I mean, think about this. How embarrassing was that? There's an event last night on the National Mall. Feet. He literally could look out and see it. He was like, hey, Jill, what's all the lights going on the National Mall for? She was like, oh, don't worry, Joe, have dinner. And that's the problem, is it was embarrassing that they couldn't and didn't invite him. How do you say – first of all, do you guys remember this? At the convention, all these people were like, what does it say that Mitt Romney isn't at the convention? And everyone, the president of the United States wasn't 10 feet from her event, and no one brought up. I'm watching B-roll of this on the news media as we talk. You can see in the windows of the White House, he was watching, and they wouldn't let him come down.
Yeah, and he keeps saying, I'm available. I mean, his team has literally publicly said, I'm available. Just tell us when you need us. And the message is, we'll get back to you.
I hear the infighting is fierce.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, yeah. It's. I think shiv was the right political shivving. I mean, this is old school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I understand, Sean, 55 million people have voted already. What is your prediction amount of people? What do you think?
Well, look, for people who don't follow this closely, Republicans normally don't do well in early vote. They just don't. We're conditioned to vote on Election Day. And you take a state like Pennsylvania, Trump was down about 1.3 million votes going into Election Day last year. He got 1.1, 1.15, whatever. And what this says to me now is that we are out there in force. When you look at a state like Nevada, Trump is up in the early vote. That is bad news for them. Does it mean we're going to win 100%? No. But I'm telling you, it's sort of like, watching, the first couple innings of a game, and we're just getting on base, and they're not. And I think, does that mean you're going to win the game? No, you still got a couple innings to play, so we got to keep our foot on the gas. But I'm telling you, if you talk to Democrats right now, they're bitter, they're angry, they're pissed. Republicans are joyful and happy because we know that we're on the ascent. Every single poll, John, go to Real Clear Politics, minus Michigan, which I think is sort of it's a logistical issue in terms of what poll came in when, but every other state, Trump is leading in every single one of them, but not just leading, because those things are static. They're a snapshot. Look at the trend in every state, and even in the Senate races, whether it's Mike Rogers in Michigan or Herrick Abdi in Wisconsin or Dave McCormick or even Kerry Lake in Arizona, every Republican is moving more and more into a winning position.
Yep.
I don't know that everyone gets over the finish line, but I'm going to tell you this right now. We are moving in the right direction.
And guess who we have on next? We have Susan Crabtree with Real Clear Politics coming right after you.
Well, she'll know.
Sean, thank you. We love having you here. We got to have you back on again soon.
Thank you, Sean.
You bet.
Thank you. And joining us now, as we just said, the political correspondent for Real Clear Politics, who just got a big rousing endorsement there from Sean Spicer, Susan Crabtree. Susan, we couldn't have written it better. Tell us what the polls are showing, what you're seeing.
Well, we're seeing a slight uptick every day in the past 2 weeks for Donald Trump when it comes to national popular vote, which is something because it's remarkable because he was down in 2016 and to 2020 to both Clinton and Biden. So to have him out ahead is either means that suddenly the pollsters figured out how to find the Trump voters and calculate them correctly, or that he is very much more far ahead than he was before in any time previously. So that when it comes to the battlegrounds, you have Trump was actually ahead by at least 1 percentage point, or some of them were less than 1 percentage point. So it's very, very close. Where are
the really surprises that you're seeing, Susan?
The surprise as well, the fact that Virginia, there's talk, now we don't have that in our polling, but I've just heard it from sources. There's talk that Virginia could be in play, and the fact that New Hampshire is quietly, people are talking that Trump could be ahead in New Hampshire. That is astounding. And if that is true, like I said, it's not showing in I'm just hearing that through sources and internal polling. From the Republican side. But when you come to look at if you want to go to our polling, we're keeping very close track of the battleground races. And Arizona, which was very, very close last time and was a problem on election night for Fox News calling Arizona for Biden, Trump is up 2.5 there.
Wow.
2.5 percentage points. And the same similar 2.4 in Georgia. Those are his biggest leads. He actually went negative. Harris is now, after this week, Harris is slightly in the lead now, according to our Real Clear Politics average of polls in Wisconsin and Michigan. So those are going to be really, really close. So
and by the way, what a surprise. The Supreme Court just decided to keep RFK Jr. there, too. So that's going to be interesting to see. I was looking at the polls on where some of the splitting of the vote. Susan, thank you so much. It was really great to have you on, and keep us posted because you guys are like the Bible of polls. So thank you very much.
Shall we take a break?
Pleasure.
Thank you, Susan. Shall we take a break right now? We're going to come back with Dr. Sky and Are the Martians Landing in New Jersey?
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Cats and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Wow.
And we are back. What a day, John.
Today is the anniversary of Orson Welles. Now, well, I mean, if we talked about aliens in New Jersey, what was the name of the town, Dr. Scott?
Groversville, New Jersey.
Groversville, New Jersey.
Yes.
Today, they'll be talking about Mexican or aliens.
Maybe
in
so,
1939, they were talking about Martian aliens. Well,
Wow.
What did that Orson Welles thing sound like?
Ladies and gentlemen, this is terrific. This end of the thing is beginning to flake off. The top is beginning to rotate like a screw, and the thing must be hollow. He's moving! Keep back there! Keep back there! Keep those men back! Keep back there! Keep those idiots back! Keep off!
Okay, that was in 1939, and today's the anniversary, and everybody in New Jersey panicked.
Yes.
They thought the Martians were landing.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Maybe it was, a couple of people from Central America. I don't know. Dr. Scott, tell us about it.
Well, 86 years ago, right down the street from these beautiful, studio broadcasting live here around the nation, around the world, Orson Welles with the Mercury Theater at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time comes on the air with this most amazing program, a rendition of Orson Welles. The rendition of War of the Worlds, that, of course, going way back. He actually sounded like this, and I quote, and I'm not the voice of Orson Welles. The radio broadcast sounded like this. We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's and yet as mortal as his own. And it continued to go on throughout the night. And it's amazing how many people at the time really believed, as they did this radio drama. They actually did say, as we mentioned before.
They said it was a reenactment, right?
They said it was a reenactment, but
people didn't hear the portion that said reenactment.
Right.
They didn't.
And they started to panic.
They did, but the problematic thing was many people, according to the historical side of this, weren't even listening to his broadcast. They were listening to the Chase and Sanborn radio hour, and though they didn't hear the beginning of his program, but you're right, panic ensued in many places around the country, but it actually gave Orson Welles a big boost. RKO Studios, later, after he, quote, apologized to the nation, he actually got his big epic movie part in Citizen Kane and other things down the line. But imagine listening to that broadcast today. Imagine how we can listen to these. And thank goodness the emergency broadcast system comes on and says, this is only a test.
By the way, it shows the power of radio,
right.
too.
Almost incredible.
Isn't that interesting?
That was wonderful.
And now in this world, when you have all these different changes with social media, well, news gets out quick, but I don't think it would have happened with the severity that it did back in 1930.
And Rita, now on the second part of our show, right after we take a break, what are we going to have?
Well, after this, but by the way, let's bring in Frank Morano, too, because we also have Frank Morano who's with us, too. Are we going to be talking with him later?
No, we're going to talk about what we're going to have in the second half of the show.
Yeah, we've got Andy McCarthy coming up.
And what is he going to talk about?
He is going to talk about some of the big legal stuff that's going on. Of course, with the big decisions with the Supreme Court and why RFK is being forced to stay on the ballot.
And you got the Attorney General.
Yes, of Virginia, who's going to talk about that enormous case.
And the federal judge reversed, or the appeals judge.
Supreme Court of the United States voted in favor of the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia.
In other words,
they can remove
Governor
the illegals.
Youngkin removed the illegal aliens off the voters' roll. Then the Department of Justice in Washington sued them, which was nonsense.
That's right.
Nonsense.
And Attorney General Mayeris, leading the fight, won the fight for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Bravo. And hopefully sets the standard for the rest of the country,
and
everybody.
Also, we have Michael Goodwin later on.
Yes, who's going to talk about the two, quote, closing arguments, Trump and Kamala Harris. What a stark contrast.
And before we go on, I understand Frank Morano's on. Frank, how are the aliens coming? Are they Mexican aliens or are they Martian aliens?
Yeah, well, hey, I think they're just as afraid of a border wall as the Venezuelans, that's for sure. But it's great to hear Dr. Sky in studio. I think if there's one guy that may have a voice better than Orson Welles, it's Steve Cates. It's really incredible.
Oh, that's very kind.
to Rita's point about the power of radio, she's exactly right. And one
Thank
of the
you.
things that
Can I
happened-
write that down, Frank? Thank you.
You're used to being right. But the newspapers were so threatened by radio because the radios were becoming such a fast-growing source for news and information. So what the newspapers did the next day is they actually played up the panic even more because they, including papers like the Washington Post, New York Times, they were trying to convince the public that radio was a menace, not to be trusted, that if you want real news, you have to go to newspapers.
Correct.
And Orson Welles obviously had the interest in playing
Well,
this up
right
because-
now, Frank, to get real news, you better go to WABC
There you
because
go.
our 5 o'clock show has, according to Nielsen, went to the sky. Or how does Larry Kudlow say it?
The solar system and the
solar
Milky
system.
Way.
Milky Way.
And the Milky Way.
All right.
As Larry Kudlow said.
Rita, you have some hot news from Goya. Hot
It's
news
the
of
top
day.
news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And there's a lot of stuff, you guys. Well, with just 6 days until Election Day, the candidates are making stops in battleground states. We'll keep you posted on that. Meanwhile, the garbage back and forth continues. Following, of course, the comments from the comedian, well, then Biden said that only garbage is what he sees when he sees Trump supporters. Kamala Harris saying she doesn't hold it against people if they vote for someone other than her. And also, finally, new details have emerged about the arsonists that damaged hundreds of ballots at 3 drop boxes in Washington State and Oregon. The New York Times reports the incendiary devices used to attack the boxes all had the phrases "Free Gaza" or "Free Palestine" written on them. And those are the big headlines. And everybody, after the break, we have Virginia Attorney General Jason Miyares about that big case.
Are illegal aliens allowed to vote, or American citizens are allowed to vote according to the Constitution? Let's see who won.
There are black beans, and then there are Goya black beans. Whole, plump, delicious, and loved by all kinds of chefs. The professional chefs at Chef's Best love them so much, they awarded our beans their Excellence Award. At Home Chefs love them so much, they awarded our beans the internationally acclaimed Goya black beans. Whole, plump, and oh so delicious. Find them in the Goya section of your local grocery store. If it's Goya, it has to be good.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
Well, we are back here on Katz and Cosby, an enormous decision from the U.S. Supreme Court. And, John, the big question is,
who won? The people of the United States and the Constitution, or the migrants?
Well, let's go to the Virginia Attorney General, Jason Miyares. Everybody watching this case, talk about the victory. Explain why this is a big deal beyond even Virginia.
Well, I mean, listen, I think it's a victory for the rule of law. It's a victory for common sense. It is this really novel idea that U.S. citizens should be deciding and voting in U.S. elections. That shouldn't be controversial. And so this is Virginia since 2006 that to remove non-citizens off our voting rolls. It's a bit astonishing that something that's been administered by both Democrat and Republican governors, suddenly the Department of Justice brought this suit against Governor Youngkin. And we're grateful that we were able to get this to the Supreme Court, again, a stay on the lower court ruling. And so, like I said, it's a victory for common sense, a victory for the rule of law.
You know, explain, if you could, Mr. Attorney General, why in this case you guys even went through these people self-identified as non-citizens. And the fact that the Biden DOJ was fighting you tooth and nail to put people who self-identified, it wasn't like Gray, push them on. Explain just how crazy the premise was that the Biden DOJ was fighting.
You're exactly right. So the background on this is that particularly under the previous Democratic governor, he expanded driving privileges for non-citizens. So people would go in the DMV to get driving privileges, and they would click a box saying they are not a U.S. citizen. That information then was transmitted on a case-by-case basis to the Department of Elections. These individuals will show up sometimes on our voting rolls, either by accident or by other reasons. And then the Department of Elections would send them a note. They would send them a letter saying, listen, you have self-identified as a non-citizen. You have ended up on our voting rolls. If this is a mistake, you have 14 days to show that you are indeed a U.S. citizen. Otherwise, we have to follow this law in Virginia to remove you off our voter rolls. And so that was the procedure. We also had a fail-safe in Virginia. You allowed same-day voting registration. So say you click the wrong box, say you ignore the mail, you could go in and vote that. Get same-day voting registration in Virginia. So that's a critical component. But I think the great irony of all of this and the cynicism, I think, is if you all recall when Speaker Mike Johnson was pushing the SAVE Act, which would really, really put into law ensuring that only U.S. citizens are voting in U.S. elections, the biggest argument by the Biden administration, the biggest argument by folks like Chuck Schumer and others is this is not necessary because each individual state has on a state-by-state basis their own tools to ensure that only non-citizens or to ensure that non-citizens are not in fact voting. And so now you have a law on the books in Virginia. You have a fantastic leader, Governor Youngkin, who's following the law. And what does this administration do? They then sue a state that's using this very well-known tool in Virginia to ensure that non-citizens aren't voting. So I think it's this type of actions why so many people have such a distrust on what's happening in government. And so we're grateful for the win. It's been a pretty intense 20-plus days dealing with the full might and fury of the Department of Justice. But it goes to show you the right leaders have the right priorities. And this administration, the Merrick Garland Justice Department just had completely misplaced priorities today.
Mr. Attorney General John Catsimatidis, any word on what's going on with that the congressional investigation on Act Blue?
I cannot speak to that because it is ongoing. I could just tell you it is absolutely ongoing.
I understand.
We're ready to make an announcement. We'll be, making the announcement. I'm sure I'll be joining you as well to give you an update. But
I look forward to the update because this is a serious situation, and what we've been telling our audience, it's a very, very serious, with foreign money possibly coming in. Okay, thank you. I won't ask you any more on that. What else would you like to tell them?
Thank you, Chad.
What else would you like to say to the American people? We got millions of people listening right now. What would you like to say?
Go vote. Go vote. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said "Make groceries affordable again," and I realized that.
Wow.
They just really captured this election. People ask me what this election about. I tell them it's harder to live in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's America. It's harder to get groceries. It's harder to put gas in your cars. It's harder to pay your rent. Get a home. I saw a stat the other day that just floored me. When President Trump left office in 2020, the average household income you needed in America today to be a first-time home buyer was $74,000 household income. That number today is $128,000.
Wow.
That just goes to show you it is harder to chase your dream, create those jobs, create that wealth. It's just harder to live. And so make sure your vote counts. That would be my message. Nothing moves in politics unless it's pushed. This is indeed the last best hope on earth. I don't know about you. I know you feel this way, Kath, but we all want to be able to preserve that last best hope on earth.
We want
this remarkable country we call home.
We want affordable food, and we want $2 a gallon gasoline again.
Amen.
And a safe border.
And to save the American dream.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General, and we'll catch up with you.
With you all.
Text us when you know something and when you're allowed to say.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Yep. And Rita, let's go over to Andrew McCarthy.
Yep, exactly. Former U.S. Assistant Attorney. Andy, great to have you here. Andy, have you looked into this Act Blue stuff? Because the House has just issued subpoenas. And, of course, the big deal is, was there foreign money that was coming in through potentially Act Blue and then going potentially to Democrats, to big Democrats? I mean, look, Kamala Harris raised, quote, $1 billion. Lots of questions here, Andy.
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell, Rita, much more than what you've described. I think I've always amazed when these stories pop up that we spent 2 years on the claim that Trump was a clandestine agent of Russia under circumstances where there was like zero evidence of actual foreign interference in the election. That was, with respect to Trump, that was just the product of opposition research that the government swallowed whole and used it as the predicate for an investigation. But in these other instances where we have actual gargantuan evidence of foreign interference in the election, it's like we're playing Three Blind Mice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Speaking of Three Blind Mice, did you see this, by the way, that the Supreme Court is essentially forcing RFK Jr. to stay on the ballot in Michigan and Wisconsin? And what's really stunning is if you look at some of the results, I was looking at like Wisconsin and in Michigan. I mean, in some cases, it is like a razor's hair. Like I'm looking right now in Wisconsin, it's 1%. Where he's getting, but then in Michigan, he's getting right now of likely voters 3%. RFK Jr., of course, he's now with Trump, and he's telling all his voters, hey, vote for Trump, don't vote for me. He wanted to get off the ballot, Andy, and the Supreme Court said, no, you got to stay on the ballot. What do you make of that?
Well, the two cases are different. One, the Wisconsin case is kind of cut and dry. They have a statute, which is not a very good statute, but it is their law that says that if you seek to get on the ballot and you get on the ballot, you must, take the position even if you don't want it. Well, they can't force you to take the position, but you have to stay on the ballot. And the only exception to that is death. So, I think it's just a bad statute. In Michigan, I think you have an activist Democrat who we got to know a little bit during the 2020 cycle, the Michigan Secretary of State, and she has conflicting explanations for why she initially took RFK off the ballot and then put him back on. That was disturbing to at least some of the Republican judges on the Sixth Circuit, and disturbing, I think, to Justice Gorsuch, who was the dissenter on the case that you're talking about. But I have to say, Rita, my reaction to this is two things. Number one, we're 6 days from the election now. As a practical matter, people have been voting for weeks. And, just physically, they wouldn't have been able to take his name off the ballot at this point if they wanted to. And secondly, if you're into RFK Jr., and you don't know by now that he said, he wound down his campaign and he's endorsing Trump, I have to believe there aren't too many people like that. And it reminds me of when I used to do jury selection, and they'd always ask, like, do you want jurors who don't know anything about the case in the media? And I'd be like, well, some cases you'd have to be living under a rock not to know about them. So you don't want those kind of people. You want like normal people who can be fair.
But I had a true story. I had a cab driver the other day who asked me if Biden is still running. So, I mean, you'll be surprised.
And what did you say, Rita?
I said, let's ask him.
Let's try that. Right.
He's running off at the mouth. I could see that.
Yeah,
he's
sure
very
is.
upset. He realized he got screwed. And his own people screwed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So before we let you go, Andy, the Virginia case, we just had on the Attorney General, Jason Miyares, talking about the decision to now at least be able to not put these non-citizens on the voter rolls. And I mean, that's an extraordinary, and it sets I think a powerful precedent. I mean, we got to have faith that people are only citizens who are voting in our elections.
Yeah, I'm delighted to come on after Jason. I think he did just a fabulous job, and Governor Youngkin did a fabulous job on that case. It was preposterous that the Biden-Harris Justice Department was trying. The only rational explanation for that is to try to help people cheat. Jason knows the case better than anyone, so I don't want to be presumptuous and step on anything he said, which I didn't. I only heard the tail end of your discussion with him. But I just think that for them to say they were really trying to protect Americans, because if there had been bureaucratic error, you could have had American citizens who were struck from the rolls and then they wouldn't be able to vote, was nonsense, because under Virginia law, you're allowed to register on the day of the election, and if you attest that you're an American citizen, they have to let you vote. So there was no chance that anybody who was actually legitimately an American citizen who got inadvertently knocked off the rolls was not going to be able to vote. That was just a complete red herring.
Yeah, and they made so many attempts to try to fix, anybody wants to fix it. They didn't. I agree. Andy, thank you so much. We love having you on.
Thanks, guys. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Andy.
And, John, when we come back, we got Michael Goodwin coming up.
And he's got some interesting stuff. What is he going to talk about?
He is going to talk about the contrast between the different closing messages from Kamala Harris and President Trump. He's got some doozies.
Let's take that break.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. Well, Kamala Harris did her closing argument last night. She's doing cleanup, trying to do today after the garbage comments from President Biden. Wow, that's all everybody's talking about.
I'm going downstairs and jumping in the trash can.
I told you, you're going to have tens of millions of people joining you, John, because it's a crowded group. Well, joining us now is Michael Goodwin, the great Pulitzer Prize winning columnist of the New York Post. Michael, first of all, boy, did President Biden take away from any message she had.
Yeah. Was it Oscar the Grouch who lived in a garbage can?
It was. I loved Oscar. Oscar was great.
Ahead of his times, huh?
It's amazing, isn't it, that we heard that from President Biden. What do you make of the timing of his comment? And boy, anything that she got. And I watched her closing statement last night. I'll tell you, it was actually painful because they claimed that it was going to be a unifying message. She mentioned Trump, trashed Trump 24 times, and then said, oh, by the way, I'm for everybody.
That's the Democrats' idea of unity. We all hate Trump. The problem is that all those garbage people, to quote Joe Biden, get in the way of the message. Look, the whole garbage thing. There are so many. It's like a billiard shot, right? It hits all the different pockets. I mean, you have Biden doing this while she's trying to, as you say, make an appeal, a closing argument as to why she should be president of the United States. And of course, his remark follows by a couple of days the comedian in the Trump rally at Madison Square Garden talking about Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. Now, there are some facts behind that. Puerto Rico has a major garbage problem. Nonetheless, it was a crude joke, and it didn't go over well, and the Democrats milked it for all it's worth. What are the odds that the president would use the same word 2 days later to undercut Kamala Harris? And it does strike me that there is more than a small possibility that he is torn, that he wants to be the nominee, and that he doesn't mind if she loses. And I do think that this is not the first time that he stepped on her message, never quite so overtly as this one, but I don't think he's in love with the idea of her being the president and him being shuttled off to retirement somewhere. So I don't put it past him that this was either a conscious or unconscious effort to sabotage her.
Yeah.
And also, I'm not so sure. It took a few days for President Obama to calm down because that wasn't his first choice. And he wanted to be the only black president. He didn't want another one.
Well, and look, even the Obamas have been basically on an apology tour of their own, at least Barack, the former president, because of his scolding of black men. I saw something that he's been meeting with black men to explain himself. Well, if you're explaining, then you miss the point. And so, look, I think the Democrats are sort of torn by hating Trump, but not really having a candidate whom they can wholeheartedly support without having to scold and denounce other voters who aren't on the bus. And I think it's a remarkable time. I think it does reflect Harris's weaknesses. It reflects the very quick overthrow of Biden back in July. We still don't know, as I read in my column today, we still don't know what he was told that led him to surrender. He resisted until the last minute. I wonder if it isn't something about the 25th Amendment.
By the way, I think so too. I think so too, Michael.
We will leave you finish the term if you agree not to run, if you step aside. She clearly wasn't. She clearly was surprised. She didn't see it coming that quickly. And I think that, they had this euphoria because the members of the party were ready to get rid of Biden. That terrible debate had further demoralized them.
But was that
Trump was going to win in a landslide?
Michael, was that a setup? Because, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, they have to have 11 meetings to make a decision what they're going to do. 5 minutes after the debate, they were sticking the knife in Joe Biden at MSNBC and on New York Times and at CNN. A few minutes right after the debate.
John, I've thought about this a lot too, and it does strike me that the whole debate, if you go back, it's very unusual to have a debate in June.
Yeah, the timing.
It usually happen in the fall.
Yeah, after the convention.
Very unusual.
So that's right. But this is before the convention even.
Right.
So, and Biden, you remember, said he wasn't sure whether he was going to debate Trump, and then he insisted that they debate in June. And it came out later that what else the DNC was doing and the campaign was doing, they were spending $50 million in advertising in June in the battleground states. So I think what this was a kind of last gasp. Here's your last chance, Joe. We're going to do a debate. We're going to do these ads. And if you don't do well, if you don't reverse the numbers, then we're going to give you the hook. And because I think that the donors, we should never underestimate what was going on behind the scenes. And the donors, remember that George Clooney op-ed? That was at a donors meeting where he said Biden, repeated the same story 3 times in a donors meeting. I think the donors were getting antsy about this. The polls were showing that Trump was building a lead, and so they had to try the debate to see if they could reverse the fortunes and at the same time run ads in the battleground states. Well, we know the whole thing flopped, and therefore he gets the hook. Now, whether he agreed with that in advance, that if he didn't do well, whatever, but that debate was a seismic event in this campaign, and it still reverberates because he's still there. I mean, last night she's a couple of hundred yards away from him,
right?
Trying to separate from him, but at the same time the White House in the background, and she won't say what she did differently. I mean, the whole thing is a mess.
It is. And by the way, the other thing I thought about with the Biden comment that happened, remember it was a week ago that he said we're going to lock him up. Politically. So this is not the first time that he's it makes you wonder. And he's looking at the polls now. Yeah. He's seeing what we're all seeing. You're wondering. And there was that whisper. I think it was at Ethel Kennedy's wedding, funeral. Forgive me, the funeral where they were standing next to. Yeah, I know. They were standing next to each other. There's so many Kennedys they get married. But they were sitting, next to each other, and you see Biden and Obama whispering to each other like. The lip readers were saying, he was saying, look, I'm a better candidate. Your thoughts, Michael?
Yes, I think that is another revealing example. I think the Post hired a lip reader who decoded it as, I'm stronger than she is, and Barack Obama supposedly responds something to the effect of, yes, that's true, but there's still time. And so soon after that, the Obamas started hitting the trail, and they haven't just done a few things. They've been out there really pushing because I think they feel there's a lot riding on it for them. If Donald Trump wins again, it will be such a repudiation not only of the Obamas and Biden and Harris, but of the whole progressive political structure, that all of the things they've been trying to stuff down America's throats in these last 4 years, from the Green New Deal, which we all know is just a boondoggle, the transgender stuff, the racial stuff, all of these things, try to make Puerto Rico a state, try to pack the Supreme Court, do away with the filibuster. All of these things are on the ballot this time. And if Donald Trump defeats all of that, that will be a remarkable achievement that will send the Democrats I think they'll have to do an autopsy as to where have we gone wrong with voters.
Yeah, it'll be a long and painful autopsy. Everybody, we were talking to Michael Goodwin. Judge Weinberg.
Michael, I'll tell you what troubled me about her speech last night when she accused Trump of having an enemies list. She said that without any evidence. There's no substantiation. She just made it up, and that's probably one of the most divisive things she could have said last night. Your thoughts?
Well, look, the phrase enemies list, of course, what's the first thing you think of?
Nixon.
Of course. And so to the extent that you can associate Donald Trump with politicians, Republicans who are unpopular now, whose reputation has been sullied, then you do that. I mean, she lied about a number of things. There were too many of them. I mean, the Post did a little sidebar because I couldn't fit them all into my column. But
did you see where she said illegals?
Ban.
And about the illegals, that she will get rid of, she said, I will get rid of illegal migrants immediately. And then the next side of her mouth, she said, but we will also try to form a pathway to citizenship. It's like, what are you talking about? Look at what she's saying.
And that was my point, that when you look at her in the shadow of the White House, the shadow of Joe Biden hangs over her, but so does the shadow of Donald Trump, because he and all the major issues that are before the country now, he is more popular on all of them. Every poll shows him with higher ratings on the border, on the economy, on inflation, on world leadership. I mean, she bears this burden of an unpopular president, an unpopular administration, a failing administration, and a more popular, more successful president. So the confusion for me is why she has not defined herself better. She's really had enough time now.
I don't think she wants to.
Last night, I think, was her last chance, and so she just didn't do it. You cannot say that she's going to be different from Biden. She just will not go there.
You know what I think, Michael Goodwin? I think she does not want to, because I think the real Kamala Harris is who she has been talking and saying for the last few years, up until the last few months. And on record, she has talked about defunding the police, a whole bunch of stuff, and she can't say who she is. John, go ahead.
Well, then we got some breaking news, and maybe on your 10 o'clock hour, more targeted attacks possible on ballot boxes after set on fire in 2 different states already.
Yeah, wow. And by the way, did you see, Michael, we were just reporting before that in Washington State, the one that was set on fire was, it had ties to this sort of Free Palestine, Free Gaza. They had messages written all over the boxes.
Yeah, look, I think we shouldn't underestimate the desire. I don't know what the political affiliation, whether there's any favoritism here between Trump and Harris, but I think we shouldn't underestimate the possibility that this is just pure chaos for its own sake, that it's not necessarily designed to help or hurt a candidate as much as it is just to sow chaos and cause doubt and confusion in the United States, that's what these nihilists want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michael Goodwin, thank you very, very much. We love having you on, Michael. Hopefully we talk to you before the results come in, Michael. We always love having you on.
Thank you.
And what do we all stand for?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless America.